Today we're undertaking a deep dive into a story that is, frankly, deeply unsettling. It's a story of profound tragedy.
It really is a young life just filled with potential, extinguished by an act that's almost unimaginable, especially considering who committed it.
We're focusing on the case of Ebony Franklin. She was 17 years old, and her death back in November 2010 in Washington, D.C., it uncovered this just horrifying truth within her own family.
Specifically about her biological father, the person who absolutely should have been her protector.
Yeah. And for this deep dive, we've gone through quite a lot of material you shared. Police reports, court documents, news articles, case summaries, a lot to process.
It is. It's definitely challenging material. But our goal here is to really carefully navigate these facts. We want to be sensitive, pay close attention to the details provided in these sources.
Right. Understand who Ebony was based on what these documents tell us.
Exactly. And piece together what the sources say about how she died. Look at the forensic evidence that became so crucial, the evidence that really spoke for her when she couldn't.
And then trace that long, often quite disturbing pursuit of justice that followed.
And just to be absolutely clear for everyone listening, everything we discuss, every detail, every quote, it's drawn only from the materials we were provided. We're sticking strictly to the sources.
Okay, let's start there then. Act Y. Who was Ebony? Let's try and set the scene of this betrayal.
Yeah, who was she? The sources, they paint this picture of Ebony Danielle Franklin. And it's both typical of a vibrant teenager, but also just heartbreakingly unique given what happened.
She was just 17. 17 years old when she was killed.
17, it's so young. You think about being that age, just full of life, figuring things out, looking ahead.
The sources tell us she grew up mostly in Capitol Heights, Maryland.
Right, living with her mother and her family in Prince George's County. She had siblings, too, who obviously shared in this unimaginable grief later on.
And we get a sense of her personality from the descriptions. Words like vibrant, confident, full of promise.
Yeah, and she had passions, interests, like lots of teenagers, a love for dancing. She was into fashion, spending time with friends.
And these details matter, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
They help us see her as a real person with a life, not just a name in a case file.
Absolutely. And there's one detail noted in the autopsy report that is just incredibly poignant. It really hits home.
What was that?
Amidst all the, the forensic findings, the examiner noted something about her appearance. Her nails were painted red, and they had these little white hearts on them. And those hearts spelled out her boyfriend's name.
Wow.
It's such a small thing, but so deeply human. It speaks volumes about her life, typical teenager, first love, everyday moments, the very things that were just so brutally cut short.
It creates such a stark contrast to the horror that unfolded.
Exactly. A horror that's just completely tied to the re-entry into her life of her biological father, Rodney McIntyre.
Let's talk about him. The sources give us some background. He was around 45 at the time of the crime, the sentencing.
Yeah, and critically, he had a history with the law. The sources mention this.
Kind of history.
Specifically that he'd served prison time. And one of the convictions mentioned was for threats in a domestic violence case.
So already a pattern of maybe control issues or problematic behavior.
It suggests that, even before the events involving Ebony, he got out of prison around 2008.
And that's the turning point, isn't it? The sources say it was after his release, specifically in 2008.
And Ebony was just 15 years old.
15. That's when he came back into her life, after being gone for some time.
Yes. And the sources are really clear. This wasn't some simple, healthy father-daughter reunion. They actually used the term grooming to describe what developed.
Grooming? How did that manifest, according to the sources?
Well, he got a job. He was working as a janitor and also volunteering at Meyer Elementary School in D.C.
Meyer Elementary, that location becomes significant later, doesn't it?
Incredibly significant, near where the crime happened. He also worked at a nearby boxing gym, so he had this physical presence in the community.
And the grooming itself. The sources mentioned gifts, clothes, money.
Exactly. It wasn't just, a dad being generous. The sources frame it as a calculated strategy.
Calculated it.
Using expensive gifts, electronics, giving her spending money. It wasn't just affection. It seems it was a way to create dependency.
Like a form of leverage.
Yeah, financial leverage, gaining inappropriate control over her choices, her movements. It sort of isolated her a bit from her mother's influence, created this really skewed power dynamic.
And this was so effective or manipulative that it actually confused people on the outside.
It did. The sources mentioned that some of her classmates, even staff at Meyer Elementary, they saw this apparent closeness, the money he was spending on her.
And they thought?
They mistakenly assumed he was her boyfriend.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, a terrible misunderstanding that completely masked the real abusive nature of what was going on behind closed doors. They saw one thing, but the reality was this disturbing control and exploitation.
And then there's the most horrifying truth, the one confirmed later by science.
Yes. The sources are explicit here, DNA evidence. It proved conclusively.
What did it prove?
That Rodney McIntyre had been engaged in an incestuous sexual relationship with Ebony.
With his own daughter?
Yes. And not just once. The sources specify it happened on multiple occasions, starting from around May 2008, which was shortly after he re-entered her life.
When she was 15?
Yes. Right up until the time of her murder.
This familial betrayal, it's just the core of the tragedy, isn't it?
It absolutely is. This profound violation of trust, the contrast between that vibrant young girl, the red nails with the hearts, and this dark, hidden, abusive reality she was living with her own father. It just establishes the depth of it all. It's the foundation of betrayal that leads us right into the events of November 26, 2010.
Okay, let's go there. Act 2, November 26, 2010, the fateful encounter. The sources detail what started as, well, a seemingly normal Friday for Ebony. She had plans.
Yeah, she did. Her stepfather dropped her off in the Columbia Heights area of Northwest D.C.
And the arrangement, according to the sources, was for her to meet Rodney McIntyre there.
Yes, the stated reason, what we learned from the material, was Christmas shopping.
A father-daughter outing for the holidays.
That's how it was presented. But her day had other parts to it. After meeting him, she had other plans.
Right, she was supposed to meet someone else, identified as W2 in the sources.
That's right, in the 3500 block of Georgia Avenue Northwest. And the idea was that W2 would then take her back home to Prince George's County because she had chores to do.
So balancing family stuff, personal plans.
Exactly. And then, after the chores back in Maryland, the plan was for her to spend the weekend with her father, back in D.C., and also visit her boyfriend at some point. So, yeah, a busy day, moving between states, meeting her dad, meeting someone else, going home, coming back. Pretty typical schedule for a teen juggling different family situations.
But the sources show us exactly when that normal day went terribly, terribly wrong. We can track her last known contacts through her phone activity.
Yeah, the records show calls between Ebony and Rodney just before noon on November 26th. One source specifically mentions 11:43 a.m. and 11:53 a.m.
Okay, so just before noon.
Then silence. According to the sources, after 12:04 p.m. that day, no more communications could be conclusively identified as coming from her phone.
12:04 p.m. That timestamp becomes critical.
Hugely significant. And this is where the electronic data gets really disturbing. The sources talk about a dark period.
A dark period. What does that mean?
It means that from 12:04 p.m. until 2:51 p.m. that afternoon, so almost 3 hours, there was no cell site information available for either Ebony's phone or Rodney McIntyre's phone.
No cell site info. So their phones weren't pinging towers.
Essentially, yeah. Normally, your phone connects to the nearest tower, leaves a digital trace when it's on and active. This dark period means, for that crucial window, neither phone was generating that kind of trackable signal through normal tower activity.
Like they went off the grid electronically for those hours.
Pretty much. A significant gap, a blind spot in tracking their movements or locations using that common method.
And this blind spot, this nearly 3-hour gap, it lines up exactly with the time frame the sources indicate the murder happened.
Precisely. And the sources are clear about where it happened.
Where?
Near Meyer Elementary School, the same school where Rodney worked and volunteered.
Right near his workplace.
Yes. The specific address mentioned is in the 2500 block of 11th Street Northwest. And the sources explicitly state the attack happened at the school, on school grounds.
So sometime within that window, between roughly noon and 2:08 p.m., or specifically within that 12:04 to 2:51 p.m. phone silence, Rodney McIntyre attacked Ebony.
Yes. And the brutality, based purely on the sources, was extreme. He stabbed her.
The sources say how many times?
They specify at least 15 times.
Quietly.
15 times.
The wounds, the details are stark, were to her chest, her side, and her back.
Chest, side, and back. Yeah. And some sources characterize this, the number and location of the wounds, as signs of intense rage, overkill even. Just a horrifying level of violence directed at her.
And what happened next, according to the sources? It shocked even seasoned investigators, didn't it? His actions immediately after.
Absolutely. His focus immediately shifted to concealment, trying to erase what he'd done.
He didn't just leave her body there on the school grounds.
No. He took deliberate steps, calculated steps to hide her. The sources say he put Ebony's body in a trash can.
In a trash can.
Covered her with trash to conceal her further, and then he wheeled that trash can away.
Where did he take it?
To the rear of a building in the 1000 block of Fairmont Street Northwest.
And how far is that from the school, from Meyer Elementary?
It's chillingly close. The sources note it's less than a block away from where he worked. He moved her just steps away.
But the cover-up didn't stop there, did it? He then started this performance.
Yes, trying to act innocent, trying to mislead everyone. He actually filed a missing person report.
He reported her missing.
Yes. Created this false story that she was supposed to stay with him that weekend, and now, oh no, she was missing.
And he kept this up over the weekend.
He did. The sources detail how he even went to local police stations to report her missing, trying to look like a concerned, worried father searching for his daughter.
It's just the calculation involved.
It's deeply disturbing. A performance designed to divert suspicion, control the narrative.
And then there's the cell phone, possibly the most grotesque part of this cover-up.
It's truly chilling. He used Ebony's cell phone after he had killed her.
What did he do with it?
The sources say he sent multiple text messages from her phone to her family, to her friends.
Pretending to be her? Or
maintaining the pretense she was still alive or maybe had run away. The messages, according to the sources, were crafted to sound like her or someone who knew her and her family really well. Manipulative messages designed to mislead her worried family.
But one message in particular stands out. The one sent to her mother.
Yes. This is incredibly disturbing. It provides this horrifying hint about what he'd done.
When was it sent?
On the morning of November 28, 2010. That's 2 full days after he murdered her.
And what did it say? The sources quoted directly, right?
They do. Sent from Ebony's phone to her mother, it read, "Remember, .the.bitch, .told, .on, .my, .man, .now, .get, .her, .out, .top, .trash."
Get her out the trash.
Exactly. A direct reference to where he'd hidden her body. And that first part, "Remember the bitch told on my man." The sources don't definitively interpret it, but it implies some kind of motive related to betrayal, maybe linked to his relationships.
But the message itself, sent from her phone after she was dead.
It's a horrifying taunt. It reveals his knowledge of her fate, his utter callousness, just a cold, calculated act after the fact that ultimately helped expose his lies.
Which brings us to Act 3, forensics and the breakthrough. Despite all these desperate attempts to cover up, the truth did come out.
Yes. Ebony's body was found. It was Monday, November 29th, 2010. The sources give the time as around 1:07 p.m., maybe 1:08 p.m.
Oh, exactly.
In that trash bin. Behind the school gym, in the rear of that building on Fairmont Street Northwest, just steps from where her father worked.
3 days after she was murdered.
3 days. And upon discovery, it was immediately clear what had happened. It was ruled a homicide right away.
And the scientific investigation kicked in immediately.
Swiftly. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, the OCME, they performed the autopsy the very next day, November 30th.
What did the autopsy confirm?
It confirmed the cause of death. Multiple stab wounds. The sources reiterate 15 or more.
And the manner of death.
Homicide, no question. The autopsy also noted the location of those wounds, chest, side, back, matching the evidence of the brutal attack.
And they collected forensic evidence, a sex kit.
Yes, standard procedure in cases like this, especially with potential sexual assault. A sex kit was completed and sent to the MPD, the Metropolitan Police Department's forensic lab.
And this is where science really delivered the crucial breakthrough, speaking for Ebony when she couldn't.
Absolutely. The DNA evidence from that sex kit, it told an undeniable story.
What did the examination find?
The sources state it found only a single male DNA profile in the sample collected from Ebony's vagina.
A single profile. And whose was it?
It was identified it was a match to Rodney McIntyre.
His sperm.
Yes. Cited across multiple sources. Absolutely damning evidence. Not just presence, but cold, hard scientific proof of that hidden, incestuous sexual relationship.
So, in the face of his lies, the missing person report.
All of it. This piece of evidence from the autopsy spoke with absolute authority. It scientifically, irrefutably placed him in that intimate relationship with Ebony around the time she died. It confirmed the most disturbing, hidden part of this case that had been going on for years.
And beyond the DNA, the electronic data continued to play a role, filling in gaps.
It did, especially after that dark period where the phones were silent once the electronic record resumed.
What did it show?
Cell site data showed both Ebony's phone, which, remember, he was now using, and Rodney McIntyre's own phone transmitting data again.
Where were they?
The data placed them in southeast Washington, D.C., specifically near an address on Brothers Place Southeast.
And why is that address significant?
Because the sources mentioned this was the address Rodney McIntyre himself told police he was staying at during that time, from November 22nd to December 1st.
So the cell data backed up his location claim, but after the murder, showing he was there with her phone.
Exactly. It corroborated where he was after she was dead. And furthermore, the cell data confirmed something crucial about Ebony's phone's location during those 3 days.
What was that?
The sources state the data showed her cell phone never left the District of Columbia, not during that whole period between her last confirmed communication at 12:04 p.m. on Friday and when her body was found on Monday.
Which completely contradicts any idea she just went home to Maryland or ran off somewhere else.
Right. Her phone, likely with him, stayed within D.C. the entire time.
And adding to all this science and data, his own behavior raised flags.
Definitely. The sources mentioned his inconsistent stories during police questioning, his explanations for his whereabouts, for Ebony's plans. They kept shifting. That created more suspicion.
So it's this convergence of evidence, isn't it? The DNA, the cell data, the texts, his inconsistencies.
Precisely. And this is where the sources really emphasize how science spoke for Ebony. When she was silenced, these undeniable facts came together.
The DNA confirming the horrific relationship.
The cell data mapping movements and timing.
The chilling text from her own phone.
The autopsy detailing the violence. It all provided this undeniable truth, giving her a voice, pointing directly at who was responsible, cutting right through his lies and his cover-up.
It's a powerful reminder of how forensic work can serve justice.
Bringing clarity and accountability even when faced with deceit.
Which leads us naturally to Act 4, the path to justice and the courtroom drama. With all this evidence piling up, the investigation focused squarely on Rodney McIntyre.
Yeah, apparently D.C. Police Chief Kathy Lanier later said he'd been a suspect from day one, which perhaps isn't surprising given the circumstances.
But the arrest didn't happen immediately. What led to it?
The sources describe it as a culmination, not one single thing, but the result of continued interviews, more investigation, digging into that electronic data, the cell records, the texts, and the development of the forensic evidence, especially that conclusive DNA match.
And he was arrested when?
In May 2011. The sources give the date as May 22nd, 2011, so about 6 months after Ebony's death.
And he's been in custody ever since.
Ever since. And he was charged with first-degree premeditated murder while armed.
That charge, premeditated, reflects the planning aspect, the cover-up.
Exactly. It speaks to the calculation involved, the disposal of the body, the misleading texts, the missing person report. It suggests intent beyond just the act itself.
His first court appearance was the next day.
Around May 23rd, yes. And given the evidence on the charge, he was ordered held without bond, seen as a flight risk and a danger, presumably.
How did the case proceed then? Did it go to trial?
Actually, no. It moved relatively quickly after the arrest. On July 29, 2011, just a couple of months later, Rodney McIntyre pled guilty.
He pled guilty to first-degree murder.
Yes. First-degree murder while armed in D.C. Superior Court. And it wasn't just a verbal plea. The sources say it was based on a signed statement of facts. He formally acknowledged the truth of what the prosecution laid out, supported by all that evidence.
Was there a plea agreement involved regarding the sentence?
There was. The sources indicate the agreement specified a prison term between 37 and 40 years, though the final decision rested with the judge.
So the sentencing hearing happened when?
A few months after the plea, October 27, 2011. The judge presiding was the Honorable Lynn Leibovitz.
And the sentence she handed down.
Rodney McIntyre was sentenced to 40 years in prison, the maximum allowed under that plea agreement.
The sources described the atmosphere in the courtroom that day. Must have been incredibly intense.
Unimaginably so. And Judge Leibovitz's words from the bench, as reported in the sources, were extremely powerful. She didn't mince words.
What'd she say?
She described his conduct as the product of a depraved heart in the truest sense of the legal meaning of the term. She really hammered home the betrayal, stating he had betrayed the bond between a father and child.
Just devastating words.
And she used this string of descriptors cited directly in the sources that just conveyed the court's absolute horror and revulsion. She called his actions disgusting, cruel, heinous, heartless, horrible, unspeakable, atrocious, indescribable.
Wow. Leaves no doubt about how the court viewed his actions.
None at all. The prosecution also spoke, reminding the court of the life lost, describing Ebony as that beautiful young woman, vivacious, spirited, a dancer who had plans for her future, someone who had dreams.
Did they offer a motive?
They articulated one that ties back to that control dynamic we talked about earlier. They stated simply, Mr. McIntyre killed his daughter because he couldn't control her.
And did McIntyre himself speak?
He did. He was given the chance to address Ebony's family. The sources quote him saying, I blacked out. I'm deeply sorry for the pain and suffering. I'm sorry for taking the life of my daughter. I robbed her of her childhood. An acknowledgement of the loss.
How did the family react?
The sources describe intense emotion, family members, observers visibly breaking down. It mentions Ebony's mother actually walked out in tears while McIntyre was speaking, just unable to listen to him.
Understandable. And official statements followed.
Yes. The U.S. Attorney at the time, Ronald Meckin Jr., issued statements acknowledging the horrific nature of the crime, offering condolences to Ebony's mother and loved ones, recognizing the unique awfulness of their loss.
So a guilty plea, a 40-year sentence. Justice, in the legal sense, was served.
It appeared so, but remarkably, the story of Rodney McIntyre in the legal system didn't actually end there.
Which takes us to our final act, Act V, the ongoing fight from behind bars. So even after pleading guilty, getting that long sentence, you just accept it.
Not at all. The sources document this relentless series of legal challenges he's pursued from prison years after the conviction.
What kind of challenges?
It's quite a pattern, laid out clearly in the sources. Starting around 2013, less than 2 years after sentencing, he began filing legal documents. Non-stop, it seems.
How many?
The sources state he's filed over 20 pro se motions.
Pro se, meaning he represented himself.
Right.
Without a lawyer.
Exactly. Filing these motions himself from behind bars.
And what was he trying to achieve with these motions?
Various things, all pretty ambitious. He's repeatedly tried to withdraw his guilty plea.
To undo his own admission of guilt.
Yes, trying to take back the very thing his conviction was based on. He's also tried to get his sentence reduced using things like Rule 35B, which is a federal rule, though the sources don't suggest he had the usual grounds like assisting the government. He's tried to get his sentence vacated entirely, thrown out, using a D.C. law, Section 23-110. That's a way prisoners can challenge their conviction based on constitutional errors, bad lawyering, things like that. Basically asking the court to nullify the whole thing.
So major challenges to the conviction and sentence. Anything else?
Yeah, the sources mentioned other motions too, trying to get personal property back, raising various sort of unsupported legal or procedural objections, almost like throwing anything at the wall to see if something sticks.
And what's been the result of all these efforts? Over 20 motions.
Denial. Every single time. The outcome, according to the sources, has been consistent and documented repeatedly.
Denial after denial.
That's right. The sources even list multiple dates when his motions were denied: June 2018, July 2018, January 2019, July 2019, January 2020, August 2020, August 2021, April 2023.
And it's ongoing.
The most recent denial noted in the material provided was July 22, 2024. So yes, this pattern of him filing and the courts denying has continued right up almost to the present day.
And these rulings consistently uphold the original sentence.
They do. Every time, the courts have reviewed his arguments and found them lacking merit. They've reaffirmed the validity of his guilty plea, the legality of the 40-year sentence based on the facts and the law. The message from the courts has been clear and consistent. The conviction stands.
It creates this really stark contrast, doesn't it? A man admits guilt in court for murdering his daughter, gets sentenced based on that, and overwhelming evidence.
And yet years later, he's still fighting from prison, constantly trying to undo the very conviction rooted in his own signed statement of facts.
Yeah.
It shows the legal avenues available for sure, but also the courts consistently upholding judgments when those challenges are found to be baseless or rely on arguments already dealt with or waived by the plea itself. He's still trying to get out, as the sources show, but the legal system has consistently blocked that path, reaffirming the justice from 2011.
So bringing this all together, we've taken this deep dive into Ebony Franklin's tragic story. This vibrant young woman, her life cut short by just an unimaginable betrayal from her own father.
We've looked at the crime, that disturbing cover-up attempt, the crucial forensic and digital evidence that really unraveled the truth and pointed directly to him.
And the path to justice, leading to his guilty plea and that 40-year sentence.
And then seeing how, even after admitting guilt, his persistent efforts from prison to overturn that justice have been met with consistent failure in the courts.
It feels like, while Ebony was so tragically silenced back in 2010,
the evidence ultimately spoke for her. The forensics, the data, his own plea, the court's judgment. They collectively told her story, revealed the truth, and brought that measure of legal accountability.
Thinking about this case, all the layers we've explored from the sources, the nature of that relationship, the sheer brutality, the science cutting through the lies, the legal process, and his ongoing fight against his own admission, it leaves you with a lot to think about.
It really does. About betrayal, about what justice means, the lasting impact of violence like this.
It does. And based on everything we've discussed today, drawn solely from these sources, it definitely raises questions that stick with you. What justice looks like might differ for everyone involved. But for Ebony, silence that day. Silence wasn't peace, was it? It meant she wasn't heard.
Until the facts came out, until now.
Yeah, a really powerful thought. And it makes you reflect, doesn't it, on the system, on the specifics here.
Considering the horrific nature of this relationship, this crime, should family betrayal like this ultimate violation of trust, be treated even more harshly under the law? Is the system really equipped for the specific depravity when a parent harms their own child in this way?
Or, looking at those years of appeals we just discussed, documented in the sources, how he keeps trying to undo his own guilty plea. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you believe a guilty plea, made with evidence, a signed statement of facts, leading to conviction and sentence, should it ever be undone?
Very difficult, somber questions stemming from a profoundly tragic case. That really concludes our deep dive for today.